Hello and welcome to the Two Mats.
Absolutely.
What is that? Absolutely.
Well, what do you expect me to say? Welcome all. One and all.
Welcome to the Two Mats.
Let me just, echo my colleagues' thoughts in welcoming you all to this.
Well, so far so good.
So far so good. No, it's good.
So this is the Two Mats for the 12th of December. This is the first time we've put it out on the Thursday night. So if you're listening on the Friday, you could have been listening last night.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're recording it on Thursday.
On Thursday.
Yeah, so good. Okay. Brought to you by the subscribers of the New European.
God bless
And we're going to talk, in the second half, we're going to talk about the extraordinary story of Luigi Mangione.
Hot Luigi.
The hot assassin, as he's being called. We're going to get into that because it's actually really fascinating.
It is fascinating.
But the first half, we're going to talk about some of the fallout that's already bubbling around the downfall of Bashar al-Assad.
So it's only 4 days since Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow.
But it didn't take Robert Jenrick 4 days to
Robert
make a twat of
Jenrick
himself.
can be relied upon to do something really bad very quickly.
Should we have a quick listen to
Robert
Jenrick being
talking
a dick?
to Nick Ferrari on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Austria is now thinking of deporting Syrians who are already in the country. Is that a measure you would support in the United Kingdom?
Yes. Look, many people came to our country and claimed asylum on the basis of persecution by the Assad regime. That regime is now gone. So those claims are now demonstrably baseless. They should be reviewed by the Home Office urgently and in many cases dismissed, and then those people should be returned home either through deportation or voluntary return to Syria as swiftly as possible. That is a fair and sensible way to run our asylum system.
Well,
as
I said to you on the WhatsApp group, and I'm afraid I do mean this, that I've got no doubt where Robert Jenrick would have been in the 30s.
Oh.
And, in the beer cellar and rushing outside.
Particularly because he has the zeal of the convert, because he's
100%.
a former centrist, former Remainer, who's seen the flame of populism and power and all that, and has just run towards it.
I mean, it strikes me. I mean, one is how the sort of disgusting mindset, which is like, I mean, that's literally the next day after the fall of Assad in Syria, and of course he's echoing the Austrian government's decision to start deporting people immediately, betraying their true colours,
which is an absolutely terrible decision.
But it's kind of that's not really the point. The point of what he's trying to do is to just communicate brutality in terms of migration.
It's back to our old friend, the Adam Serwer book, The Cruelty is the Point.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
And it's disgusting in 150 kinds of ways, but we were talking on the Monday podcast about the nuances and subtleties of this and whether the new regime should be delisted by governments as a terrorist organization and so on. And what's important, I think, to say is that a huge amount of very, very subtle and good work is being done, a lot of it under the radar, by very well-meaning and well-intentioned people around the world, right? So, to your point on Monday about will HTS, the main group in the rebellion, be delisted? I was talking to someone in Whitehall who said, look, it's just a question of when, not if. But we need to do a bit of due diligence, and that's, people are on the ground, it's not public, but
also it's leverage as well at the moment, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's motivation for
but
for
also
Jelani
that
to do the right thing.
To reassure people. I mean, I think there's a recognition, and I certainly listening to American podcasts, I think the same is happening in DC, is that there's an understanding that if you keep HTS and other groups on sanction or listing designated terrorist group lists, it's going to be very hard for NGOs and humanitarian groups and diplomats to work with them. So I think the pause will be shorter rather than longer. But the reason I raise that is because, this is actually something we haven't seen for a long time, which is statesmanship going on all over the world. Very delicate. Everyone knows that, Syria is a potential tinderbox. We've seen in the region how things can go south very quickly, and there's a lot of goodwill and good effort going in to make sure that it doesn't, and the Syrian people get at least a shot, a shake. And that's the backdrop against which a toe rag like Jenrick hurls himself into the front of the debate and says, It's time we started sending back Syrian refugees, which
should we remind people
opposite.
who this Torag is?
He's the Shadow Justice Secretary.
Yeah. And so Badenoch's appointed him. He was the co-runner for the for the leadership of the party.
He was in the last two.
But he's also the guy who said, I don't like Disney murals in child migration
that's right.
hotels and stuff like that.
He was a very, very performative minister, and he had, he's, I think, one of the top MAGA UK exponents in the Conservative Party.
And that's why I think this is really interesting about how the alacrity with which he seized upon this issue to sort of mark out, piss on that particular lamppost.
Absolutely.
And say, right, start deporting them now, it gives you an interesting clue as to how things are going to play out in the Tory party and with Nigel Farage's Reform Party over the next few years, and where the alliances might come. That could, and I just say could, although increasingly I think it looks, more likely than unlikely, that could lead to Farage having a reasonable pitch at becoming Prime Minister of this great country.
I mean, let's look at the sort of, the chances. I mean, the Conservative Party has changed its leader quite a number of times in the last 4 years, right? So 5 years. So you got May to Johnson, Johnson to Truss, Truss to Sunak to Badenoch, all in the 2019 to 2024 period. Yeah. So there's a lot of volatility still in the bottle. Yeah. And Jenrick must be thinking, if Badenoch doesn't start to gain some traction soon, my Jenrick's chances quite good. And how's he doing that? Well, he's trying to be more obviously reform adjacent than she is. Yeah. And what's so dispiriting is that that's really now the zone of conflict on the right, which is, how do you position yourself in relation to Nigel Farage?
Exactly. And it was very interesting because Alistair Campbell on his podcast was talking about the question time he did with Farage, and saying that he was talking to Farage, and he was saying that Farage is saying he's sitting next to Sammy Wilson, the Ulster unionist, and he's saying they're both shaking their heads at question time, saying, why is Badenoch going off on that Hague, sacking? No one cares about that. Why isn't she plastering immigration all the time?
Which she then did this week, but to no
not great effect.
So, I mean, the question for her, it's interesting because one of the things that Jenrick kind of played on in his campaign was he said, I can starve Farage of oxygen, but he didn't attack him. Yeah. Whereas Badenoch was like, no, I'm not having deals with Farage. I am going to resuscitate the Conservative Party. Yeah. And her opinion of Farage, and I think it's reciprocated, is not strong. Which, just a footnote that doesn't mean in 3 years they won't be talking about an alliance. Yeah, but
of course.
Jenrick, I think, wants to reunite the right, which
do you think he was trying to get sacked in this?
No, I think he's laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
I think what he will do, because Badenoch's, she talks about how, I'm an engineer, I like to build things from the ground up. Well, again, it's the first 6 months are the only months rule. You need to get something up and running pretty quickly. And I think the critique will be there isn't much grit and sinew there. And Jenrick will say, I will do all the things that the last government didn't do on immigration. It'll be Rwanda on rocket boosters. We'll leave the European Convention on Human Rights. We'll start deporting refugees. You can imagine the script. Yeah. And this will be catnip to a lot of Tory members. There's no question. Tory members, to be clear, did favour Badenoch by quite some margin. She's been popular with them for a long time. But, of course, it's different when you become leader.
Do you know, something struck me interesting, I think, on that point, which was Jenrick and Farage are always talking about policy, right? About an extreme policy. Whereas
themes.
Yes, okay, better said. You said that better, yes. Starmer and Badenoch when they're talking, I read Badenoch's interview with The Spectator.
Yeah.
And she's talking about herself all the time and her values, and, you know, she doesn't like doing lunch, and she, you know, believes in hard work and this, that and the other, you know, and actually when asked about what are the policies, in other words, what are the themes of this new opposition, she said, well, that's like asking a restaurant for a menu when it's not even going to open for 4 years.
Yeah,
right?
well, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
You have to hit the ground running.
And I think Starmer's a bit like that. He's constantly talking about himself and his values. And
also
all of that.
the slow build. But both of them have in common, actually, is the professional deformations of their respective backgrounds.
Yes.
So, you know, Starmer's a lawyer and she's an engineer.
Yeah.
Well, we need politicians.
Well, and of course, he won't give a rat's arse that people like us are sitting here calling him abhorrent.
I mean,
that's a plus.
That's a plus.
Yeah.
So what he has done is, you know, with huge but completely characteristic irresponsibility, hurled a grenade into the sort of pool of the British response to this, you know, daily changing process, and demand and creating or trying to create, let's put it no more than that, a domestic resentment against people who are, you know, Syrian refugees in this country are, I'm sure many of them want to get back, but understandably, because the country is not yet fully pacified, and the form of the government, though it's in transition, is not clear. You know, I don't blame them for not wanting to go back immediately.
No. But Matt, so to me, the point is, it's nothing to do actually with the Syrian.
Of course, it isn't.
Refugees that are here. The point is, it's the people he's targeting. The dog whistling.
It's bad, but we need a new word from dog whistling.
Yeah,
you know,
it's more than that. It's
because dog whistling was back in the day of Michael Howard and Linton Crosby.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
when it was kind of you know, you had to understand it to know that. But this is overt, isn't it?
Like fascist foghorning.
It is fascist foghorning.
Yeah.
I like it. Let's go with that, because what he's saying is, right, you know, your dictator's gone, your excuse is gone, sod off.
Yeah. But again,
he's not talking
to them. He's talking to. Let's be clear about who he's talking to. He's talking to people who are reform tendency voters.
Yeah.
Who are anti-immigration, full stop.
Yeah.
A bit like that woman on Question Time.
Yes,
the woman
the
in the
one.
red jacket. You know, saying, I don't believe in any asylum.
Yes.
I think this concept
We've taken
of people fleeing war, it's all overblown.
Yeah,
she said.
well,
you know,
it's an odd time to say that, but anyway, in history.
Well, exactly. And then she literally listed Syria as one of the countries where there's no conflict.
Yeah,
right.
That was a good call, wasn't it?
But this is the point, isn't it? That all of these things are facts and rational response.
Yes.
It's all immaterial.
It's totally
all
immaterial.
emotion-based stuff.
It's emotion-based, and it is. I think that Jenrick, again, to give him his baleful due, understands that the Conservative Party is now in an existential crisis.
Yes.
Which is not a good thing for the country, by the way.
Yeah.
Because you need a centre-right opposition to a centre-left government, healthy democracy, all that, you know. Yeah. But we're not going to have that for a long time, if ever.
Yeah. Some say Starmer's the opposition to a centre-left government.
Well, I think a lot of people in the Labour Party would say exactly that.
Yeah.
But what he is intuited is that the game is up. He thinks the game is up. All the momentum is with Farage, and the question is, can he sort of either in alliance with Farage or on his own win back those votes to become a sort of reform adjacent Conservative Prime Minister?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm absolutely confident is his plan.
Yeah.
Now, why? Again, one can't emphasise it enough. Why is he doing that? Because we've seen again this week that Farage is the big story in British politics. You know, the government's been making all these announcements. Big speech last week by Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner doing a lot on planning and housing, some of which I think is really good.
Yes.
But the story was Nigel Farage announcing that property billionaire Nick Candy had defected from the Conservatives and was going to be Reform's treasurer.
Yeah.
And what happens? By the end of the day, well, before the end of the day, Elon Musk has tweets, when is the first electoral opportunity?
Yeah.
And then apparently Candy and Musk are in text communication.
Yeah, I
Now,
can
Candy wouldn't reveal the detail, but since he's the treasurer and Elon Musk has been rumoured to want to give $100 million to Farage,
Yeah.
I don't think it's hard to work out what they were probably talking about.
Again, Farage was publicly dismissing that story, which said had the ring of a chairman of a football club backing the manager. It was like absolute, you can nail it on.
Well, also his language was quite careful, which was no plan. We have no plans to raise VAT kind of language.
Yeah.
I mean, what also is, and I wrote about this in the current New European, is that how, one has to not ignore the changes he's bringing about in reform since the election, because there was that wild run of only a few weeks between him coming back as leader and polling day on July the 4th, and it was all over the shop, and a lot of the candidates they had were unvetted. But he's brought in this guy, Zia Yusuf, who's still under 40, tech tycoon again, Goldman Sachs background, very professional, calls himself a British Muslim patriot, and he's set his face to setting up constituency organisations. They've already got 300, candidate vetting, all the stuff that you'd expect a professional party to do. And it is undoubtedly striking how quickly this is all happening.
Yes, and how quickly it's working for them as well.
Yeah, it is.
The polling numbers have gone from 15% at the general election up to north of 20% now.
I mean, I do think, and I said this in the piece, I think one of the problems is, John Curtis said at the weekend, the great polling guru, who is generally very good, but he said that reform have got to stop banging on about immigration. And that is the opposite of the truth, which is that for reform, the fact that immigration, particularly because of the recent numbers from the Office for National Statistics showing that 900,000 plus came to this country in net at the end of June 2023, immigration is going to remain front and centre for the foreseeable future. And what people like Farage do is they use it as a proxy for everything else. It's their portal into fear of change, disorder, unemployment, social dislocation, housing, public services, wokery, you name it.
Yeah.
There's no grievance that a nationalist can't turn into an attack on migrants. And it does worry me a lot, that actually. Yeah. It really does, because I think that's going to be the story of this parliament as things stand.
And that's where I think that, again, to what is worrying and what's of the highest order of urgency is that somehow the government finds a way of combating in like-for-like language this narrative.
But they have to do that. Here's the sort of question that increasingly preoccupies me about Keir Starmer is not that language is not available, because I think you and I could probably come up with it in 2 minutes. Yeah. But is he capable of delivering it? Yeah. Because he is so stuck in this groove of smash the gangs. Yeah. He's a look. I was DPP. I was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. I smashed gangs. I can do it again. Well, I can tell you this: you're not going to. If your objective is just to bring down the numbers, you're not going to that much, given the economic and public service needs of this economy, and B, smash the gangs is not going to have a impact. Even if your policy does work exactly as you think it's going to. Yeah. The forces at work here are tectonic, and until you have a progressive centre-left government, whatever you want to call it, that dares to turn the thing on its head and speak the truth and be candid to the British people about immigration, we are simply making life easier for Farage.
100%, and also the foolishness of that language is that it's directly continuing the same argument that was the argument of the opposite of the Conservative Party.
Yes, it's just swapping smash the gangs to swap the boats.
But it's playing on their field, when there's no need to at all. When you can be, just as the other red jumper man on Question Time, who I thought was brilliant.
No, he's great.
And by the way, we got him to write a piece after the event. Yes. And which has been the subject of massive conspiracy theories from all sorts of
saying he works for us and
fools just on Twitter,
member of the public,
saying, managed to turn an article around in a day, did you? How did you manage that? Well, that is how newspapers work.
Tend to do that.
Which honestly, I wanted to mock them. Then I thought, my God, this is another media literacy problem. People have got no idea how journalism works.
Yeah, but also, there's a sort of hatred of the distrust of the media and ignorance of how it works. But also, there's a sort of reflex to turn everything into a conspiracy theory. I mean, again, in terms of language, I'm beginning to wonder whether conspiracy theory does justice to it, because it's so dominant now as the sort of discourse of politics, which is, just to recap, it was your doing, but, getting the guy, I forget his name, what was it?
David Hillier. Unfortunately, he's got the same name as a Reuters business journalist. Well, that then added into the whole thing.
And made this excellent intervention in favour of immigration and asylum on Question Time, and which was then, became an article in the New European online. And, before you know it, it's axiomatically this must be the deep state, or he's a TNA plant.
What was really interesting to me was that there's like a number of people who call themselves, well, actually, interestingly, one of them, this fool, Alex Armstrong on GB News, who explicitly doesn't call himself a journalist. And I've worked out why. It's because calling yourself a journalist opens you up to journalistic accountability. So that apparently GB News presenters are under instructions: do not refer to yourselves as journalists. Anyway, so this
only Tommy Robinson calls himself
only Tommy Robinson can call himself a journalist. This fool Armstrong repeats what he's read without does no research whatsoever. Just spews out this tweet and says the guy's a plant and blah blah blah. Works for the New European. He's a journalist for us, and then when challenged by us and just said, look, you're wrong. It's 100% wrong. Just take it down, retract it, whatever, correct it. The absolute sophistry that they try to deploy to work their way around. And Alex, you'll have to look up what sophistry means. I appreciate it. But to try and work their way around not having to just say, oh, sorry, got that one wrong.
Yeah.
That's what's wrong with people, is that you get embedded into these positions and then just point blank refuse to accept that, oh, I got that wrong. And it's not that hard a thing to do, to say.
No, it's not.
But
it's the doubling down tendency of conspiracy theorists, which is that the fact that you produced absolutely clear receipts and proof that this is what it says it is, just proves that it's all part of the Illuminati, and you're all part of a massive global conspiracy.
And this is going to get worse and worse.
It is, and actually, it's it's one of the biggest aspects of sort of the coming politics is how do you govern and how do you have a decent political debate in a world where almost everything is instantly twisted and malformed into the basis of some sort of new conspiracy. I mean, in real time. I mean, that's just one article, but everything is. One of my favourites is that that actually Labour and the Conservatives are one party. That often appears in my responses and comments and things.
The whole thing's a sham.
They all have paymark. The division is just a construct of our overlords, whoever they may be, Illuminati or whoever. You choose your overlords, and therefore, LabCon is just a kind of actually one big blob that pretends to be against itself.
Ingsoc.
I mean, you can make up what you want. If you wanted to. I mean, it would actually be a very interesting journalistic exercise how easy it is to get a conspiracy theory going.
I know, but so I've
deadly.
I've often thought about it. Let's just plant something, but then
it might work.
It would. Well, the point is, it would work.
Yes,
and it would fly, and you'd sit there responsible for just another erosion.
Yeah, before you knew it, there'd be people storming the Capitol.
Oh, jeez. Right, folks. Well, one way to counter all of this conspiracy nonsense is to share podcasts like ours with people who would be receptive to them.
Yes, definitely.
So do that, please, folks. If you know anybody who you think would like the Two Mats, please do share it. We are fast growing, and it's much appreciated, but the faster the better. So we're going to take a very quick break and come back and talk about a totally different story, but a real, a fascinating story from across the water. Okay. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
So we switch up story
Yes.
pace. Astonishing story.
Very, very
in the States.
horrifying and strange.
Assassination of a
Yes.
health insurance company, which everybody's seen by now.
December the 4th. I mean, actually, one of the things about it is just for a minute to say who this guy was,
100%.
because he's got completely lost in all of this.
Yeah.
Is a guy called Brian Thompson. He was the CEO of United Healthcare, 50 years old, father of 2 sons. And very quietly, his family laid him to rest in Maple Grove, Minnesota on Monday.
Yeah.
And that was barely noticed.
Now, just to illustrate the asymmetry of information and what you've just alluded to, it took me about 10 minutes to find. I thought, how old are his sons? I was just
Yes.
wondering, are they young kids? Are they teenagers? Are they growing up? It took me about 10 minutes to find out
Yeah.
how old is. They're 16 and 19.
Right.
So, never a good time to lose your father in
No.
any circumstances, but horrible for them. And then you've now got this guy, the alleged killer, being held up by an awful lot of people, some of whom we'll name and shame.
Yes,
in a moment,
absolutely.
as the hot assassin.
Yeah, the hot Luigi. I mean, so there are so many aspects to the lionization of Luigi Mangione. One is that donations are pouring in for his legal defense. He's being treated like a hero, a sort of Robin Hood figure, matinee idol. He's a good-looking guy, so that has played into, lots of social media posts about how glamorous he is.
Yeah.
Now, there's always been a bizarre and sick aspect to the sexualization of murderers. That goes back a long time.
Yeah.
But obviously with Instagram and social media, it's been turbocharged.
Yeah.
And, Jimmy Kimmel, who ought to know better, did a segment on his show about what he called a huge wave of horny.
You're joking?
No, about a segment on how everyone on his staff
Was fancying this guy?
and people they knew were fancying it. And this guy he's not a Robin Hood. He's a sort of, if you are a fan of Taxi Driver,
Yes.
the Robert De Niro movie, he's like Travis Bickle.
He's exactly like
he's
that.
He's like a privately educated, frat-educated version of Travis Bickle.
He is.
And he was very theatrical. He wrote "deny, defend, depose," which are things that health insurance companies, words they use to not pay.
Well, they say it's the famous book, isn't it, by a guy called Jay Feynman.
He got it slightly wrong.
Which is delay, deny, defend.
And
he changed delay to depose.
Right, and he wrote that on his bullets. So he was clearly, and then he goes to Pennsylvania and is arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, in a McDonald's. Footnote: a lot of McDonald's staff are now getting threats.
On what basis?
On the basis that someone in McDonald's must have shopped him, and therefore they're part of the problem. It goes everywhere. So I think the first time we were communicating on this earlier in the week, I was drawing your attention to a very popular journalist with Gen Z called Taylor Lawrence, who'd say, who has just been celebrating this. And she said,
"Is this the woman on Piers' show?
And she said, and they wonder why we want these executives dead."
Yeah.
And then on Bluesky, and then cross-posting the name and photo of another CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kim Keck, to her accounts on multiple platforms, and saying, ho ho, that she hoped her followers engaged in a very peaceful letter-writing campaign against murderous insurance executives. And I've read other journalists saying that Luigi Mangione had been, quote, radicalized by pain. Okay. And Bill Burr, who's a comedian through my previously had a great deal of time and was amused by, said, I think on his podcast, "I love that CEOs are afraid right now. You should be. A lot of you are mass murderers."
So I've got a couple. We've got Jamelia Jamil,
yes,
the actress and activist, who said about this guy, "A Star is Born."
Amazing.
Right? And with Jonathan Van Ness, who is responsible for the very hit show Queer Eye, said, "Our show is all about modern day heroes. We should devote the whole series to this guy, the whole next series to this guy." I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, you're that 16-year-old son, and you're seeing the world celebrate the guy who is accused of gunning your father down in the street.
Here is what I think about it, and listeners may disagree, but this is what I think. This is the language of fascism. This is the language of a fascist mob.
Yeah.
Now, we've just been through a year of calling Donald Trump a fascist, and rightly so, right? The threat he represents to American democracy is clear and present, right? But here you have people in show business, senior journalists, influencers on social media, you name it, embracing political violence, glamorizing political violence, with the impact that health insurance. There was a piece in the New York Times this morning, Thursday, about how health insurance workers, ordinary people just going about their jobs, not CEOs even, are having to take special measures because they are fearful of reprisal, just as election officials were fearful of violence during the election campaign and how we deplored that.
Yeah.
And let's get it straight, everyone. This is not civil disobedience, right? This is not...
he is not a Robin Hood character.
No, this is not just Stop Oil throwing soup at a painting and people having a legitimate debate about whether that's a reasonable tactic, right? This is cold-blooded murder. There
was a great piece in the New York Times, I know we've both read it, by Vanessa Friedman.
Yeah.
About... actually, it was about... She was describing this theory of Eric Hobsbawm, the historian.
Yes.
Talking about the social bandit theory and how... there's a sense of romance around people who are seen as taking out extra legal justice, So, the law isn't working, so they've taken the law into their own hands. And how they glamorize people like Robin Hood, but also people like Jesse James and Che Guevara and people who actually. I mean, if anyone's ever read. I walked past a young woman the other day walking past me in Hackney wearing a Che Guevara T-shirt. And I wanted to say to her,
do you know what he did?
Do you know who this guy is? Go and read John Lee Anderson's Che Guevara, A Revolutionary Life.
Very
and
wise.
It's the portrait of a psychopath, a homophobic psychopath. Yeah. And yet, here is Guevara portrayed as... the lone social bandit, the noble gorilla.
The noble gorilla
is what they call him, and yet he's a psychopath. He's an absolute psychopath. This guy Mangiani is a deranged loser. Who's just killed a guy
who
in the
is
street.
Being glamorized as if he was a massive breakout film star or a TV star or pop star.
There's something weird also about that journalist you mentioned, and I'm pretty sure she's the same one who was on Piers Morgan's Uncensored.
She is.
Where Piers Morgan has to stop her in the middle of it and saying, and direct quote this, say, "I'm sorry, but what the fuck are you laughing about?"
Yeah.
Because she's sitting there giggling about people being outraged by it. It reminded me of... I think her name's Rivka Brown on Novara Media, who the day after the October 7th atrocity said in a tweet, "This is a day for celebration." And there's something where people's hatred of a system, and people can hate the insurance system in the US.
That's a totally separate point.
And with a lot of...
completely disconnected.
Evidence. But the killing of somebody, when you... don't see that for what it is, an act of absolute inhumanity, you've lost your humanity. You've lost.
Full stop. I mean, and there's another, there are so many aspects of it, but one of them is this. The populist right globally wants us to do this. They want progressives and centre-left people to give up norms and laws because they do better when that's the case. Yeah. And people are hurling themselves into the elephant trap, and because the argument is always basically silently or overtly, it's okay when the good guys do it. Yeah. So, Biden pardons his son, right? Is a good example of that. Just as Trump saying that the members of the January 6th committee should be in jail is a good example of that. Cheering on the murder of abortion doctors on the right is a good example of that. Shred the Constitution, surrender our values, coarsen public debate, right? So you get to the point where you have late night TV hosts making jokes about a guy who's gunned down a father of two. And I thought one of the few people who actually really stepped up to the plate was Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania and a possible contender for the Democrat nomination in 2028. And he said, and I'm quoting, "In America, we do not kill people in cold blood to resolve policy differences or express a viewpoint." And that's the point, which is the rule of law. It's only meaningful if it protects the people you hate.
Yeah.
If the law just protects the people you like and agree with, that's not the rule of law.
That's right.
That's just power.
That's right.
Right?
And what do you say what does Jimmy Fallon say when some nutcase guns down somebody he thinks is a good person?
Rightly, the left have been furious about the appalling violence meted out on people in the reproductive health care sector, abortion doctors and so on. Of course they have, and rightly so. But this is absurd, that you're appalled by that but think this is funny. And it was funny, I was thinking, this is actually really serious, and it speaks of something very worrying. So I went back to a book I often refer to, which is Ece Temelkurun's How to Lose a Country, which is her guide. She's a Turkish writer, 7 Steps from Democracy to Dictatorship. And I just looked at the contents page and it leapt out. So step 3 of her list is remove the shame. Immorality is hot in the post-truth world. And then step 6 is let them laugh at the horror. And
God, that's terrifying.
It's terrifying, isn't it? She's absolutely right. And in America, but not just America, there's another way of putting it, which is it's called LOL Nothing Matters, which Tim Miller of the Bullock, a Never Trumper, has written about very well, which is kind of Trump's won, so norms, laws, who cares?
Yeah,
We
all
just
bets are off, yeah.
Grab what you can, kill who you need to, and it's the stakes in this are incredibly high. I mean, I think. You said to me the other day, maybe it was a little while back, but I think you're quoting your wife actually, which is that if there's a but, everything before the but is meaningless,
Bullshit,
right?
yeah.
Right, and this is one of those cases, right? So this is absolutely, because one of the things people have said, and I've heard it on British podcasts as well, is it's obviously murder's terrible, but the private health insurance system in America is terrible.
Yeah.
This is the only time we shouldn't be having a debate about the private health insurance system.
Exactly
right.
Yeah.
This is the wrong moment, because basically what you're saying, if you do that, is you can murder your way to the debating chamber. Okay.
That's right.
And I rarely do I say Starmer got it absolutely right, but one of the things he got absolutely spot on right was during the August riots, when people were writing and podcasting and saying, they're terrible, these race riots, and trying to burn down hostels and attack mosques. That's terrible. We hate it. But people do have legitimate grievances about migration, and maybe this is the debate. And Starmer was just not having any of it. He said, this is against the law. This is thuggery. We're going to run the courts hot during the night to make sure that these criminals get what's coming to them.
Exactly right. I mean, you're absolutely right to say that at that point, the issue needs to be completely separated from the crimes, and the crimes need quarantining. And completely scrutinized for what they are, and say, you have there's no mitigation.
Don't care. Don't want to hear about
these
that.
Absolute crimes of murder, of burning down mosques, of attacking people. It's off the table.
There are many times when we can have legitimate debates about immigration. In fact, we've been having them since those ONS figures came out. But at that time, I didn't want to hear from nobody saying...
This brings us back, Matt, full circle to the Jenricks of this world, the Farages of this world, who, if not directly, lend sympathy and lend succor to people who are sympathetic or do have the word but in that sentence, but that we've got legitimate concerns and mitigate these crimes. What are crimes? And people have just got to be very basic about this and say, there's no stand up and denounce these crimes.
Yeah.
Without any but.
No buts.
Dot.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like I have a similar feeling about when Salman Rushdie was attacked with stabbed, and I have a similar feeling about the Batley teacher who's still in hiding. Right,
100%.
You know, both of those occasions. There are many moments to talk about the way in which Muslims are treated.
Yeah.
You know, and the sort of Islamophobia and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Those moments are when that debate stops,
right.
and you assert the law and social norms. And I think that there's one of the sort of the long part of the long tail of the populist wave that's sort of spreading across the free world is that it sort of drags people who are progressive by temperament or centre-left by temperament into its own sort of horrible, you know, pit of abyss of amorality and nihilism, which is that this is the moment above all when I want to hear liberals and centre-left people defending the rule of law.
Exactly.
You know, which is why I admire Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor, for coming straight out and saying no. You know, I'm sure Josh Shapiro. I don't know enough about his healthcare policy, but I'm sure he, you know, like all people of his age and background, has pretty strong views about the private healthcare industry in America and will have said lots of things. But it was excellent of him on that day to say, this is a rule of law day, guys. Yes. And it worries me a lot that everything now is sort of filtered through the entertainment filter, you know?
Yeah.
That this guy's kind of fun and kind of hot.
It's scary.
It is scary. And it comes back and bites you.
Yeah.
Because in all these countries around the world where populists and nationalists and authoritarians are already in power or about to be in power, you know, this is exactly what they want. They feed off the corrosion and erosion of norms and laws so that they can do what they want, conscious that those guardrails have been taken down with the complicity of their opponents.
It's such a shame because it's such a great opportunity to have a positive nationalism around a tolerance of other people's views and beliefs and people's right to exist and to live, and an intolerance of people who break the law.
Yes.
The law that we've created over hundreds and hundreds of years.
I do understand, for example, that sometimes people who are deeply frustrated by issues commit acts of civil disobedience, right? And civil disobedience has a patchy but often glorious history, you know. So if he'd glued himself to the headquarters of this healthcare company, well, I mean, then I think one could have said, well, you know, this is interesting. Why are you doing this? Interview him, you know. But that's 100% different to gunning down this guy. And you know, it's really important to say again the name of the guy. The guy's name was Brian Thompson. Because everyone is memeing and joking and having fun about Luigi, and Brian Thompson is dead. You know, and celebrating his death is vile, disgusting, and it's counterproductive.
Agreed.
It's I know what you think. If there are people out there who are thinking how great he is, I know what you think you're doing, but I promise you it will lead to the opposite of what you think you're doing.
100%. Okay. Well, listen, we'd love to hear what you think about this, dear listener.
This is a very interesting one.
So subscribe to The New European is the first thing to say. That helps fund all of these conversations and the podcast. We are nothing without your subscriptions. So go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. And if you subscribe in the next week, we'll give you a free copy of Alistair Campbell's diaries worth £20. So that's worth doing. Send in your thoughts and feedback to 2mats@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS at tnepublishing.com. Thanks to our team at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill, remotely this week. On the mend from a bout of sickness. He said, nah, don't say that. That'll get edited out, I'm sure. Anyway, but until Sunday.
Sunday, it's goodbye. No.
Yeah.
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.